All right, welcome everybody. We are going to get started. This is the weekly forum. For those of you who don't know what that is, in our company, in our organization, we hold a Thursday night open discussion. So people who are in our classes can come together and share their wins, pose their questions, whatever's going on. But once in a while, we have a special event like this is tonight, where we come together on a topic. And it's open to the public. We're glad you're here. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. And my name is Leslie Householder. I am co-founder of the School of Life Mastery with my husband, Trevin Householder. And my topic generally is called Rare Faith. I have a blog, rarefaith.org. And what that is based on a quote by Boyd K. Packer. And I'm going to share that quote with you. But I've been doing what I do for now 25 years and discovered that quote from one of our community members about, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 years ago. And that's when I adopted the term rare faith as the subject matter. Like I said, we've been talking about it for 25 years under different terms, but it just really sums it up in that term, rare faith. So here's what he said. He said, there are two kinds of faith. One of them functions ordinarily in the life of every soul. It is the kind of faith born by experience. It gives us certainty that a new day will dawn, that spring will come, that growth will take place. It is the kind of faith that relates us with confidence to that which is scheduled to happen. There is another kind of faith, rare indeed. So there's your rare faith. This is the kind of faith that causes things to happen. It is the kind of faith that is worthy and prepared and unyielding, and it calls forth things that otherwise would not be. It is the kind of faith that moves people. It is the kind of faith that sometimes moves things. It comes by gradual growth. It is a marvelous, even a transcendent power, a power as real and as invisible as electricity. Directed and channeled, it has great effect. Now, 25 years ago, my husband and I had already been spending 7 years prior really frustrated and stressed out about money, our finances. We married young. We had big things happen early on. We had a baby with heart challenges. We had cars that wouldn't start, trying to get ourselves through school. And for whatever reason, we just could not get in front of it. And our belief in being able to find income that would provide for us faster than we needed to be spending money, our belief was really low. And so we started searching for answers. Long story short, and that's not what tonight is about, but I'm giving you this setup so you understand why we're talking about what we are. Had some friends that started showing us principles that have an impact on our outcomes. And we realized that these principles or these laws of success, as invisible as they are, were governing our outcomes. And what we didn't realize is that we had been violating those laws and principles, and it explained why we were in the situation we were in. And so once we had that awareness, we could do something about it. And long story short, once we understood what the principles were, within 3 months, we tripled our income. And that started the ball rolling for why I do what I do, because the change was so profound and so relieving that I thought I have to share what I've learned. That was the beginning of the books that I wrote, The Jackrabbit Factor, Hidden Treasures, Heaven's Astonishing Help with Your Money Matters, and ultimately Portal to Genius, which I will mention a little bit later. But that's kind of where that came from. Tonight, we are going to be talking about rare faith principles and debt. So these principles can be applied to any area of your life, to your health, to relationships, to money. They are principles of faith. And when we find ourselves struggling in one of those areas, if we will begin to think differently and think lawfully according to those principles, then we set ourselves up for the best possible outcomes according to God's plan for our lives. So tonight we have Monica and I are hosting. So this is Monica Zollinger. She's one of my dearest friends. Say hello, Monica.
Hello.
We just spent about 8 to 10 days in Norway in June, cycling the Lofoten Islands together. We did that on a cycling trek with our mentor, Lane Knighting, and it was a very challenging experience. Would you say that, Monica? That was a challenge. Do you regret going?
No.
Not at all. Not at all. So I partially went because Monica had done a cycling trek with Lane before she did Greece with him. And there were a lot of hills in Greece. What we're going to talk about tonight has some parallels to what we experienced on that trek. I remember at the end of the Norway trek thinking, I am so glad I went, learned a lot of things about myself, had some personal breakthroughs. And coming away, I thought, man, I really ought to write a book about what I experienced just so I don't forget anything. And what will I call it? The name that popped into my head was So Many Hills. That's the only thing I could think of to call it, is So Many Hills. Monica, can you see a parallel between the problem of debt and cycling hills in Greece or Norway?
I was just thinking one of the things that you said was not another hill, not another hill. And we just kept thinking there's more hills, more hills. And I think we have more bills and more bills too, right? And one day we were tired of the hills. And I remember coming around, and I don't know if it was you or I that said it. We said, Hill, we were not expecting you. And how many times do we have those unexpected, bills and expenses that come up?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we have to go into debt to take care of those. But we just keep climbing and we keep going, and there will be a downhill.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Thank you, Monica. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about some of the lessons that I learned on the Norway trek that apply to what we're going to talk about tonight. It's just going to be kind of a high level, but the first day, so I was somewhat unprepared for the trek. I prepared the best I could, but I was not as conditioned and as prepared as so many of the others, all of the others who were on that trek with us. And so day one was supposed to be kind of a warm up. I don't know, it was probably 35 miles or something like that, 30, 40 maybe, I don't know. Relatively few hills. There was one big climb, but all the while I was doing it, I thought, oh my goodness, if today is this hard, how am I going to do tomorrow? Because tomorrow was a mountain. And so the whole time I was just like, oh, how am I going to do it? How am I going to do it? And I started stressing out, and I had a meltdown that day. At the end of the trek, I went to Lane. I'm like, this was profound. And so if I struggled so much today, how am I going to do tomorrow? And he had some words for me that changed some things. He said, well, how do you want to create tomorrow to be? Because he was hearing me talk about how hard it was and how afraid I was of what was in front of me and how I didn't know how I was going to do it. And you can be thinking about debt in that context too. Like, how are we going to do this? And he said, you can create it in your mind to be something to dread, or you could create it to be anything you want. What would you like it to be? And one of the other cyclists had come away from it saying, I felt so strong. And so I decided I wanted to feel strong, and I wanted to come away from the day saying today was easier than day one. Despite the stats, I want to finish day two feeling amazed and grateful that it was actually easier than day one. Now that math doesn't math, right? That doesn't add up. How could a day that's got steeper hills and a longer mountain be easier than the day that didn't? But I put it to the test, and I decided to see myself rolling into town on the end of the second day, reporting to our friends that this was easier. I had so much fun. That's what I intended for day two. And by the end of day two, as hard as it was, and it was longer, it was steeper, and all of those things, and Monica is my witness, we got to the end and we had so much fun with the day. Our outlook about it changed our energy and gave us strength. And the same thing can happen when we're looking at the debt load that's in front of us. So on another day, I noticed that the mindset that I approached that day kind of stopped working on the next day. And every time I found some kind of a mindset tool to get me through, I had to change it up the next day. And what I was learning were a variety of tools to help me when I faced challenges. On one of the days, the only way I could get up those hills was to just count the next step, 1, 1, 1, 1. And by just looking down at my feet and just counting 1, 1, I started counting to 10, or, then I started looking at a hill and guessing how many pedals do I think it would take for me to get to the top of that? I guess maybe 400. And so then I knew I'm just going to put my head down and count to 400. And I'd always overshoot on purpose just so that I could surprise myself that it didn't take as long as I thought. That was another approach I took. On another day, I was talking to Lane again. And actually on this day, I was having a prayer. And my prayer was, what mindset tool or what strategy, what little trick or gimmick can I bring to this day? Because nothing that was working before is working anymore. What do I need to do today? And I felt the Spirit say, what if you thought nothing about the next hill? And I'm like, because I had been used to looking at a hill and saying, okay, well, this time I'm going to look at it like it's teaching me and it's making me stronger. That's one thing that my friend Christy Lee would say about running. When she'd see a hill, she'd say, hello, hill. I've been expecting you. Come run with me and make me stronger. So I would say that about these hills in Norway. Hello, hill. Come cycle with me and make me stronger. Thank you. I was expecting you. And that's what Monica was talking about. We were using that for a while. And then we thought we were just about to town and we rounded a corner and there was this hill that was not on the elevation map that we were following. It wasn't there. And so that's why she's like, hello, hill. We were not expecting you. And that was super frustrating. But I thought, okay, what if I approach the day like, what if I thought nothing about it? And so that day, when I would look up at the hill, I would see it and I'd say, oh, there's a hill, and I would pedal. End of drama. That was all I would do. And we can do that with the debt that we're facing as well. We can say, oh, there's a bill, pay it. Or if you can't pay it, make a phone call. Hey, I owe you this. I see that it's due in a week. I'm not sure where I'm going to get the money. Can we work something out? Like putting the drama away lets you have more opportunities open to you than if you're so afraid of what you're facing that you don't, that your brain goes offline and you stop thinking like a reasonable person could about how to solve the problem. We're going to talk more about that. Anyway, so there are a lot of parallels, but there is in the rare faith world, once you start looking at your challenges and then use the rare faith principles to conquer it, and I'll just give you a quick thing. Some of you are new and don't know what even we're talking about in terms of rare faith, but for example, there is a principle that says, if you will picture and put on the screen of your mind an image of the problem solved and allow yourself to imagine how that would feel, then your next idea about what to do will be more inspired and on a higher level than if you try to solve the problem from a place of fear. So Albert Einstein said, the significant problems we face in life cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. So if we want to get on a different level of thinking to solve it on a level and with a strategy that will keep us from repeating the problem again and again, then we have to change our level of thinking. How we change our level of thinking is to see it done and let ourselves feel it as if it is done. I promise you, every time you do that, you will get different ideas than if you don't. Now, a lot of times you won't know that it's a different idea. You may not even feel any different about that idea, but it's a true principle that you can trust that you will get better solutions by, practicing that principle than if you try to tackle a problem from a place of fear. Let me give you an example. In the world of debt, drop in the chat what is one of the first things or one of the most common things you believe that people do to handle the debt problem. What is one of the most common things that people try to do to solve the debt problem? Work harder, garage sale, reduce expenses. Yeah. There's one I'm looking for. Keep going. Borrow what? Refinance. Okay. Shift from one form of debt to another. Yes, this is what I'm talking about. So if you are in debt and you're afraid and stressed and everything, the first thing that a lot of people do is they'll say, oh, I've got this debt problem. I think I'll go consolidate, but that's still debt. That's solving a problem at the same level of thinking that you were at when you created it. So that's a level right here of thinking. All right. There are better ways to solve that problem. And in order to see out of the box, you've got to first believe that it's possible. What does it look like to be out of debt? What would that feel like? What will your life look like? How will you be spending your time? How will you be spending your money when you're not spending so much of it to service a debt? Most people don't have an answer to that question right away. They just say, oh, well, then I'll get the things I want. Well, what are those things? Oh, I'll spend my time with more freedom. Well, how are you using that freedom? So we're not going to take a lot of time to go into all of that. I have a lot of ground to cover, but that is one of the principles that we talk about in Rare Faith. Well, it's an exhausting cycle when you have a pattern of pulling the rabbit out of the hat, dealing with crises. So for example, if you're in a crisis, using these Rare Faith principles can certainly help you solve it. We have hundreds and hundreds of students who have applied these principles and have reported on, oh my gosh, the money came from this place that I didn't expect. The money came from that place that I didn't expect. 1 month, our problem was solved because our dog happened to get together with a neighbor dog that had gotten loose, who was a purebred, and the puppies took on all of the characteristics of the show quality purebred father. And we got $400 out of that accident. You know what I mean? And so it's like, you don't know where the solution is going to come from. But when we apply rare faith principles, stuff happens. Unseen help starts to work on your behalf to show you the way. However, these rare faith rescues can become even an addiction. So if you've been in this community very long and you've started to practice these principles and you're seeing results and you're seeing like, yes, I know how to do this, because every time I'm in a big hole and there's a big urgent crisis, I apply the principles and something happens to help me. And you get excited about that and it feels really great, but it can become a habit. Now, here's the thing. If you are constantly dealing with crises, it can lead to burnout, bondage, and it can even perpetuate the problem of getting into debt so that you have debt to get out of because it feels so good to pay it off. That's a trap. The rescue can feel like a little bit of a dopamine or a rush of emotion. It's a surge of adrenaline maybe because it feels so good to see it work, but you can get addicted to needing it. But what if you could live moderately and recognize the Lord's hand in your everyday kind of blessings? Do you have to have the drama in your life to see his hand? So be careful, because often you're going to get just what you expect. If you find yourself in a crisis, rare faith can certainly help you solve it. The laws are in place, and when you operate in harmony with them, they deliver. But if we keep putting ourselves in crises, then the constant need for a rare faith rescue may be a clue that we're breaking other laws. So rare faith rescues can be addictive, and they aren't God's pattern to constantly have to need them. His way is to live normal day-to-day life soundly, prudently, operating on a long-term plan, planting seeds and having patience until the harvest. According to my late mentor, Bob Proctor, there is a season for planting and a season for harvesting, and they rarely occur in the same season. So here's a caution. I believe that the adversary has a play in his playbook that when someone is really good at living the rare faith principles, they become dangerous to him, right? Because we're learning how to trust God and we're carrying out God's purposes, and we are having more faith in his promises that he will take care of us if we walk the path and help build his kingdom and do all the things that we were put here to do, finding and fulfilling our purpose and our mission in life. So if we are dangerous to the adversary, he tries to get them thinking, us thinking, that we're not living the principles well enough unless we're living on the edge of disaster to constantly try to prove that they work. He leads us into situations that get us needing windfalls. I believe deceptive spirits operate in emotionalism and in sensationalism, but sometimes the presence of the Spirit in our lives is evidenced most by simply the absence of drama. So we calm down, we slow down, we become grateful for the rescues because they will always be there when we genuinely need them. But let's move toward believing that we can live the kind of life that has no reason to think about money at all, that we can go about our duties for the sake of the service we perform and not for the sake of what we're going to get for doing it. That's operating in God's economy. To know we will always have sufficient for our needs as we fear not and simply focus on our contribution. So about expecting windfalls, we had experienced that relatively amazing windfall in the year 2000 when we tripled our income in 3 months. Again, this was after those 7 years. So when we later found ourselves drowning again in the middle of the Great Recession of 2008, we started looking again naturally for another windfall. We thought, well, we've seen him come through in a big way. We need a big way right now. And we knew it could happen because we'd seen it. We'd seen it many times in other things. And we expected God to show us how our mistakes even could be turned into blessings and our failures could miraculously be turned into wins. There's this law of polarity in the world of these principles that says that contained in every adversity is a seed of equal or greater benefit. And so here we were in this giant adversity, worse than 2000. And we thought, this is really big. Therefore, the blessing contained in it is really big. How is he going to turn our investment mistakes, because we had invested in a lot of real estate at the top of the market, how is he going to turn these mistakes into a blessing? And so we started looking for the miraculous windfall that was going to make this albatross a cash cow, and it just wasn't. Instead, he let us fail. He let us suffer. I had a lot of questions during that time because already, here it's 2008. I had been teaching these principles for 8 years. I had my books out. They were bestsellers. We were getting feedback from all over the world that people were having wins of their own. And it was hard to read and it was hard to hear that what I'd been teaching wasn't working for us right now. And I didn't know how to make sense of it. So I had a lot of questions during that time. And so much of what we learned through that is why I had to write the sequel to The Jackrabbit Factor, which is Portal to Genius. It is a free download. If you are not aware of that book, go read it. I'm dropping a link in the chat. Again, it's free. Since we have not very much time here, you'll get a lot of what I want to share with you in that book. But Prospering by Degrees, let me talk about that. Even though practicing the principles during the recession gave us a few windfalls to keep us going, I mean, including 1 month, we had a windfall of 43,000, but with the mess we were in, it still wasn't enough. And it took us a lot of years to bounce back. When I realized that even a windfall that big wasn't going to be enough, it broke me. And that's when one of my most profound moments happened, when the Lord led me to a scripture in Mosiah 21, when Limhi's people had also carelessly allowed themselves to fall into bondage. And it says this, and this was an answer to my pleadings, we had been struggling. It took us about 5 years in the recession to feel like there was hope. But this was the scripture that he led me to. It says, the Lord was slow to hear their cry because of their iniquities. Nevertheless, the Lord did hear their cries and began to soften the hearts of their oppressors, that they began to ease their burdens. The Lord did not see fit to deliver them out of bondage, yet they began to prosper by degrees in the land and began to raise grain more abundantly and flocks and herds, that they did not suffer with hunger. There's a whole article that I wrote about that when I was in the recession and that epiphany I had. I'm going to drop that in the chat for you. But what that taught me and what I needed to know and what I needed to hear was that the big windfall wasn't coming. He wasn't going to just rescue me, but he would allow us to prosper by degrees. And what that did for us is it got us to a place where we began to accept where we were at, accept the mess that we were in, and accept a long-term process for recovery. That was a really, really important shift for me because I had been all about this rare faith thing and I'd seen miraculous rescues and I couldn't understand why we weren't getting one. But it's because he had something more he needed us to learn. And the only way we could learn it was through the long process of recovery. And so at that time, we looked into Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. We went through that and we started following a very long-term debt elimination plan. It was going to take a long time. So one of the things that I encourage people to do when they're looking at debt and they're stressed out about it is don't be afraid to look at it. Creditors are more likely to work with those who are proactive. Don't wait until the creditor comes chasing you before you talk to them. Be the first one to call them, and they have more mercy. And there are occasions where creditors will even forgive a debt. Being proactive has potential best case scenarios. The other thing is, I remembered years ago, I was playing with my kids and one of my kids stepped on my hair while I was on the floor playing around. They stepped on my hair and it hurt. And my first initial reaction was to pull away. But pulling away when someone is stepping on your hair only hurts more. And that's what taught me to, I got to lean in, handle the problem before I pull away. And the same thing is about debt. If you're in debt, don't ignore it. Don't run from it. You got to turn and look at it. Have the courage to look at it. Have the courage to map out your monthly expenses and find out where all the money is actually going. Look at it. Let it be sobering. Let yourself feel whatever you're going to feel. Don't be afraid of it, because here's the thing. You can't get to solving it until you look at it. And getting to peace fastest is going to happen by getting real about the situation. So if you knew that solving it would come faster by looking at it, how fast would you want to sit down and face it? If you want it to go away faster, look at it faster. Planning for the long term. I've heard it said that the very poor think day to day. The poor think week to week. The middle class think month to month. The wealthy think year to year. And the very wealthy think decade to decade and beyond. So when you start thinking long term, the short term problems just don't hurt as much. But if you're thinking only day to day, that debt and the agony that comes with it, or the burden that you feel with it, just fills your whole view. Like that's all you can see. But if you'll look ahead at how you envision your life 10 years from now and start to create a plan for that, then today's insurmountable thing is just something to get past to the ultimate destination. And the way you think and feel about your problems is going to have a very direct impact on the opportunities that you find to help you solve it. Let me say that again. The way you choose to feel about the problem is going to have a very direct and real impact on the nature of the opportunities that will come your way to solve it. So if you're hating it, if you're afraid of it, if you're depressed about it, if you're beating yourself up about it, then the opportunities that come your way are going to be of the nature of, how can we move this to a better interest rate? How can we shift it and kick the can down the road? It doesn't solve the problem. But if instead you'll look at it like, okay, here's where we're at. This is what happened. And it really doesn't matter why it happened, guys. There is no judgment here. All right. It happens for life. Life happens. Emergencies happen. Sometimes it's materialism, but most of the time, I would say it's probably not. And so let's talk about that. If you find yourself thinking only about the problems right in front of you, try to start thinking month to month instead. In other words, what can you do today so that next month is better? Or what can you do this month to make next year better? An example of what it looks like to maybe think month to month instead of right here, right now, is you might be able to look around your home and find something that you could turn into cash, sell on the Facebook Marketplace or in your neighborhood or something that might take a few weeks to sell. You need the money tomorrow. You've got a bill due tomorrow. But what if you put something out there that you could turn into cash that might take a few weeks? Well, that's going to make next month easier for you, right? So start getting in front of it by thinking farther out. What can you do this year to make 10 years from now better? My husband and I, during the recession, one of the things that set new opportunities in motion for us was when it was our anniversary. We hadn't allowed ourselves to go out to eat for a year. And for our anniversary, we decided, you know what? We need to just take a break from this pressure. Can we go out to eat for our anniversary? Could we just pretend like everything's okay for 2 hours? We decided, you know what? We're already in this mess. It wouldn't hurt to go have a $2 soup. All right. So we did that. Trevin got salmon. I got the $2 soup. That was how much faith I had that we'd be okay. He had a lot more faith than I did. But we went out to eat at that restaurant. And the whole time we were sitting there, we were thinking and talking about, you know what? Have no idea how we're going to get through this week. Have no idea how I'm going to get through the month. We have no idea how we're going to get out of this mess. But do you think we'll have it figured out in 10 years? Oh, of course we will. There's no way this problem right now could even last 10 years. So let's talk about what we'll be doing then. And we started to build a vision and put on the screen of our mind a picture of what we would be doing, how old the kids would be, what we think they would be up to. Where do you think we'd be living? What do you think we'll be doing? And we started to get excited about the 10-year picture. And when we were done and our energy changed, we felt different. We got excited. We allowed ourselves to forget about the debt for just a block of time. When we were done, we paid the bill and we walked out to the car. And as we were getting to the car and he was getting ready to open my door for me, we heard somebody behind us running out, yelling, wait a minute, turned around. And it was the server or the person at the checkout saying, hey, because it's your anniversary, the meal's on us, and handed us a voided receipt. We had already paid the bill. We didn't know that they realized it was our anniversary, but they voided it. Could we have created that as I hope we can go to this restaurant and that they will forgive the bill? No, didn't cross our mind. Our job was to see the problem done and let ourselves feel it. And that is lawful. That is one way that we align with the laws that govern our success. Our Father in heaven is so loving, so kind, so merciful that in his creation, this system is in place to care for all of his children. And what he asks is what we learn in scripture. Fear not. He talks about the eye of faith, to believe in something before it's happened. These are true principles and they apply in our finances as well. And so by doing that, by aligning with these laws, being obedient to these laws, his system could provide. It's already in place and there to provide for all of us. And so by doing that, the resource that showed up in that moment was they don't need to pay for that food. And what that did for us is it gave us confidence that all we need to do to get through this mess is to keep returning to a vision of where we're going. And for us, we had to go 10 years out because there's just no way to understand how it could possibly work in the short term. So project your mind forward. If that bill is on Tuesday and it's due and you're going to be in big trouble if you don't pay it, imagine Wednesday. What are you going to be doing Wednesday to celebrate that somehow God provided a way? Let yourself imagine that conversation you have with your spouse. Honey, isn't that amazing what God did for us? He opened a way. He showed us a way where that could come from. You don't even have to imagine how it is or how it happened. In fact, it's better if you don't, because what we come up with to envision how it could happen is so limited, and he is so unlimited. You think about the disciples where they're like, Jesus, we need to pay the temple tax. And he's like, well, just go down to the fish, the first fish you pull out, there'll be a coin, go pay the tax and let's get back to work. Like, the point of that story in my book is it could come from anywhere, and we can't imagine where it will come from. We do the best we can. But this is what I'm talking about, rare faith is. So let's see. If you find yourself thinking only about the problems right in front of you, try thinking month to month. Try thinking year to year. What can you do this year to make 10 years from now better? So Genius Bootcamp is where we can help you solve the immediate problem right in front of you so you can start planning for the longer term. Genius Bootcamp is one of our courses. Mindset Mastery is another one of our courses where we help you lay out that long-term plan and teach you how to think so that exactly what you need shows up exactly when you need it. But let's talk about daily bread. So the scripture that says, give us this day our daily bread, it's not a phrase meant to depict scrambling for your daily miracle. I think it's about having an eternal perspective with the confidence and trust that today will work itself out, that God will provide what you need in this day. You know, the children of Israel, they couldn't collect more manna than what they would need for that day, or it would spoil. And that was a message. There's a principle in that. And that is it sounds like two different things going on here. We don't worry about the day to day because God's got that handled. We ask him for what we need today. A person with a long-term vision is more likely to be willing to do some uncomfortable things in the short term to get there. A person who only thinks day to day is less likely to take on a second job, for example, or cut back their expenses or sell off some assets. Sometimes that's what needs to happen. God helps the man who helps himself. But what if you hate it? What if you hate what needs to happen in the short term? I love how James Allen in his book, As a Man Thinketh, explains it. He affirms God's promises when he explained how it goes like this. He says, here is a youth, and it's like a 150-year-old book. And so you have to kind of imagine it in today's terminology, but he says, here is a youth hard pressed by poverty and labor, confined long hours in an unhealthy workshop, unschooled and lacking all the arts of refinement, but he dreams of better things. He thinks of intelligence, of refinement, of grace and beauty. He conceives of, mentally builds up an ideal condition of life, like putting on the screen of the mind an ideal vision for where you're going. The vision of a wider liberty and a larger scope takes possession of him. Unrest urges him to action, and he utilizes all his spare time and means, small though they are, to the development of his latent powers and resources. Very soon, so altered has his mind become that the workshop can no longer hold him. Those 2 jobs can no longer hold you. Those 4 jobs, whatever it is you have to do to make ends meet, it's temporary. And if you're thinking long term, the temporary becomes more tolerable. It has become so out of harmony with his mentality that it falls out of his life like a garment is cast aside. And with the growth of opportunities which fit the scope of his expanding powers, he passes out of them forever. So whatever your ideal is, you hold to it, you build it and you hold to it. And the opportunities line up for you to get there. However, the first opportunity right in front of you might be the unwanted, the undesirable, the thing that doesn't appeal to you at all, but it's the avenue to get you to the next opportunity and beyond. So here's an action step for you. Map out a plan for 2026. Look at your debts. Look at what there is. Make a list of how much you owe on each and what those monthly payments are, and map out a plan. Dave Ramsey's program can help you do a debt snowball. It's powerful. I do highly recommend it. How does that help you live rare faith principles? It goes right together. It's like some people want to just go straight to rare faith principles and say, you know what, I don't want to focus on debt because it'll just create more debt. You need to address it. The important key here, though, is you address it unemotionally, because what you think about with emotion will grow. And so You can't not think about debt. You have to address it. Just address it unemotionally. Look at it like it is what it is. Oh, hello, mountain. There you are. Let's climb it. No drama, no emotion. Just map out the plan for 2026 on how you're going to tackle that debt. Also, map out a plan for how you want to feel at the end of the year. Where do you want to be? And then come up with the best plan you can think of for getting you there, which means start moving. Start somewhere. If the plan is sound and you start moving in that direction, the Lord is going to steer you. You can't steer a parked car, so you got to be rolling. But if you have no vision for your future, then that opportunity that shows up that's undesirable could be your next dead-end job that you stay stuck in for the next 3 decades. And you don't want that. You want it to be a stepping stone to where you actually are going. And you need to be really clear, to the best you can be, on where that is. All right. So focus and be careful. Do you love the feeling of making a dent in your debt? Do you love paying off a debt? I do. Okay. But if you have a lot of emotion about that and you actually succeed in paying one off, you may be training your mind to go find more so that you can get back to the feeling of paying off debt. And so here's how my late mentor said it. Paying off debt is a horrible goal. It's something you should instead do on the way to a goal. Paying off a debt is not a goal. It's what you do on the way to a goal. So either we focus on our debt payoff or we focus on the contribution we can make. We're going to talk a little bit about God's economy and how it's all about bringing our contribution of our gifts, our talents, our skills to lift and serve others. And it doesn't matter the job that you bring this to. A plumber can do this, or a ditch digger. It doesn't matter what the job is. If you bring to it this God's economy mindset, which I'm going to share a little bit about in just a minute, but you bring that mindset to the job, then that job will become the blessing that leads you to the next opportunity that will be better, if that's what is needed. So operating in God's economy, this is something that I learned from Dr. Carrie Skrdla. She is one of the leaders in our community. What I learned from her is that there are 2 different economies that we can be operating in. And that's some of what we're going to be talking about tonight. The difference between operating in man's economy versus operating in God's economy. Let me lay a little bit of a foundation. Man's economy. Man's economy is competitive. It's based on a limited supply of jobs, limited money, cap on your opportunities, that it's all limited. It's survival of the fittest. It's got a belief that money solves problems. And not that it doesn't, but it's got a focus that you need money to solve your problems. There's a lot of comparisons going on in man's economy, and your success in man's economy depends on the market. Sometimes it can even lead to pride in poverty. In other words, a belief that we must struggle to stay humble in God's kingdom. Yes, poverty can help us be humble, but it's not where we should expect to stay. God's economy, on the other hand, God's economy is abundance. Everything in his universe, everything is programmed to multiply. It's being focused on our mission or purpose. Wallace Wattles talks about leaving people with an impression of increase, that in whatever you're doing, if you leave people feeling lifted and better than before they were with you, that is operating in God's economy. It's belief in abundance, that is always an opportunity for us. There is wealth in both economies, but in man's economy, it's built on the wrong spiritual foundation and it can corrupt us. So God's economy does not depend on the market. It's market proof. It doesn't matter what the market is doing. You think about, there was a man during the Great Depression who was looking for work, couldn't find work. And so he approached a railroad teamster or manager and said, I want to work on the railroad here. And he's like, I don't have any positions for you. He's like, well, I have nothing else to do. I might as well make a contribution. So he started working anyway. And ultimately that led to a position. I mean, this is God's economy where the focus is on what I can do, how I can serve, and opportunities open up. God's economy also is illustrated in the scriptures. You think about the ravens and Elijah in 1 Kings, where it says, and it shall be that thou shalt drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed thee there. So Elijah went and did according to the word of the Lord, and the ravens brought him bread and flesh in the morning, and in the evening he drank of the brook. So provision can come from the most unexpected channels. And when we follow divine direction, God's supply will meet us there, which is wherever he sends us. Another example is the cruse of oil in 1 Kings, where the widow, and she went and did according to the saying of Elijah, and the barrel of meal wasted not, neither did the cruse of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord. With our obedience and faith, he promises to open the flow of continual provision. Who wouldn't want that? But it requires shifting from a man's economy mindset to a God's economy mindset. Another example is the consider the lilies story in Matthew 6. And why take ye thought for raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Jesus reminds us not to be anxious about material things. The lilies grow effortlessly under God's care, showing that he provides without strain. When we focus on faith and seek God's kingdom first, our needs are naturally met. It's a call to rest in divine order and abundance rather than worry or toil. But how do we get there? We get there through increasing our knowledge and understanding of how his universe operates. So here's the thing. I know a lot of you hearing that are thinking, probably, because I've done those things. I've done what God has asked me to do, and he hasn't provided. Here's what I learned, at least in my case, is that one of the most key principles in this system is that we fear not. And I could look back on how my anger, my frustration, my worries, everything was stemming from the fear of not having what we needed when we needed it. And then I was brought to this verse in Doctrine and Covenants 67:3. Says, ye endeavored to believe that ye should receive the blessing which was offered unto you. But behold, verily I say unto you, there were fears in your hearts, and verily this is the reason that ye did not receive. So rare faith is all about learning the principles that we can have confidence in, so that when we feel that fear come up, we can say, oh, that's scary, but here's what I know is true. And you shift to a knowledge of the truth on why God will provide according to his promises. So an example of operating in God's economy is operating on a creative plane versus a competitive plane. This is something I learned from Bob Proctor. And there is this example. This comes from the book Hidden Treasures, Heaven's Astonishing Help with Your Money Matters, which is free. I'm dropping a link in the chat. And that is this, that if you have a pie, the competitive plane says this pie cut into 8 pieces or whatever, in order for one person and their pie to get bigger, someone else must get less. That's the competitive plane. But in God's economy, we operate on a creative plane where in this pie, this person and their piece, they expand it outwards. They expand it outwards into the nothingness. And by doing so, it increases the diameter of the pie and everybody's piece gets bigger too. That is law of the vacuum. There are just so many things. You'll see it in the book Hidden Treasures, an explanation of what that is and why it works. Debt is not always about materialism. It can be, but sometimes it's just about trying to keep your head above water, taking care of your family, or preparing for the future. Some debt can be appropriate and necessary. So for tonight, we're just suspending any thoughts of judgment about how people get into debt. It's important to let go of the story around it so we can create a better path towards freedom. So if you are a debt purist who believes nobody should ever be in debt to anyone ever, then you should also never go to a sit-down restaurant ever again, or you'd have to insist that you pay them first for your food before they bring it to you. We're in debt while we eat the food because we haven't paid for it yet. So debt purity is unrealistic. However, if you did do that, say, I'm never going to go into debt, therefore I'm going to sit down, I'm going to order my food, and I'm going to pay for the food and wait for them to bring it to me, then you're putting them in debt. You see, we have to kind of let go a little bit of the rigidity we have so that we can look at it and look at it without the emotion that generally comes with it. So I'm going to drop another link in the chat. This is a link to a podcast clip where Jared Halverson, one of my favorite teachers, shares this story, but I'm going to quote some parts and summarize the rest. So before I forget, I'm dropping that now. He posted this only 3 weeks ago, so super powerful and timely. He says, I think materialism and covetousness or greed or commercialism is something that is part of the last days that we're all going to struggle with. Well, in section 111 of the Doctrine and Covenants, we see some interesting things having to do with that hope of making money. And in the saints' defense, it was for a good cause. It was for the cause of Christ. But here's the situation going on. They had just dedicated the Kirtland Temple, perhaps the most expensive religious building in American history. The saints had nothing, And now they have less than nothing. They are deeply in debt. It ended up costing about $175,000 in lost assets, which would be over $6 million today. And for a church that was so tiny and so poor, you just lost 6 million. In some ways, the church was land rich, but cash poor. They didn't have liquid assets that they can pay off their creditors. Debt was an issue. And the Lord was telling them, we need to pay it. But what are we going to pay it with? We have no money. Well, they created a bank to help raise liquid assets, but the timing was awful because they didn't know they were heading into a nationwide recession, which would later be called the Panic of 1837. So they're in this predicament and they're thinking, how are we going to pay for everything we've already bought? If you've ever been in debt beyond your means, maybe you can relate. Well, in the middle of all that, someone in the area says that he heard there was a treasure hidden in a cellar somewhere in Massachusetts. And Joseph thinks, maybe this is the blessing we've been waiting for. Because back in section 104, the Lord had told Joseph, you've got to pay your debts and I will provide means for you to do it. So Joseph is curious and thinking, well, maybe this is it. Maybe this is how the Lord will provide. He's not just looking to get wealthy. He's simply looking to obey the commandment to pay his debts and to have his radar up for how the Lord is going to do it, because that had been the promise. So they go see if they can find the treasure and it doesn't pan out. But here's what the Lord had to say about it. And as I read this, I want you to listen to it as a potential message from the Lord for you too. D&C 11, starting in 1. I, the Lord your God, am not displeased, notwithstanding your follies. And I think back to when we were in the recession and the mistakes we had made. What a comforting thing to hear that he's not displeased, even though we were foolish. I have much treasure in this city for you, for the benefit of Zion and many people. Therefore, and there's some skipping that I'm doing, but therefore, it is expedient that you should form acquaintances as you shall be led and as it shall be given you. And it shall come to pass in due time. Its wealth pertaining to gold and silver shall be yours. Concern not yourselves about your debts, for I will give you power to pay them. And the place where it is my will that you should tarry shall be signalized unto you by the peace and power of my spirit that shall flow unto you. For there are more treasures than one for you in this city. Therefore, be ye as wise as serpents and yet without sin, and I will order all things for your good as fast as ye are able to receive them. Amen. So what are some of the other treasures that we gain through the opportunity debt is to learn to trust his promises? Treasures that cannot be gained in any other way than through the stress and stretching of the appearances of not having what we need. So some of the attributes that are developed through these situations are patience, bringing order out of chaos. And that begins with looking courageously at where you're at. Faith, trust, responsibility, maturity, wisdom. If we could just suddenly claim these attributes, then the experiences maybe wouldn't be needed, but we can't. So that's one of the first things we can do, is start looking at our situation with gratitude for how going through it will be good for us. It's counterintuitive for sure, but that is one of the most important things we can do to switch from operating in man's economy to participating in God's economy. So I want to invite you to learn how to start engaging more in God's economy. I'm going to put a link in the chat where you can learn more about the course that was written by Dr. Carrie Skrdla. She was a minister of another faith before converting to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and her insight into the whole world of financial messages in the Bible is tremendous. So dropping this in the chat now, and it's a course written by her, but she and I are going to actually start teaching it together starting next Wednesday. It's online, it's virtual. We meet at 11 in the morning on Wednesdays, Mountain Time. It is recorded, so if you can't attend live, that's available. But there is also an independent study option if you don't want to do the coaching with me. Or you can also check out the bundled paths on that page to get even more at the best value. Part of the program is even going to show you how to use God's economy to find the better job you might be looking for. Now, if you know that you feel like, man, I really need this, but you're not sure how to pay for it, here's the thing. In God's economy, there is always a way. So you can just get on a call with one of our team members and they can help you figure it out. There's never any pressure. Just a place to get some free coaching and explore your options. Our team members are experienced in these principles. They've experienced rare faith success of their own and can help you understand how to use them and even how to use them to find the way to join a class with me if that's what you would like to do. Something else I want to share with you, if you haven't been around recently, the Rare Faith ebook. So I've got those 3 books. I'm writing a 4th book. and I'm calling it Rare Faith, but I have like the first 15 pages that are done. The rest of it isn't done. It's still in the works. But if you need some confidence in the Lord's promises, this short ebook is going to help you start thinking in a way that invites more unseen help. And I want to make sure you didn't miss that. So here's another link. You guys are just going to be over. They say when you do webinars and stuff, you should have one call to action. I've got 40. It's just, there's just so many things I want to share with you and something for everyone. And the last thing I want to tell you about is our 21-day faith walk. Whether or not you join me in operating in God's economy, I hope you'll join us for that. It's in a private Facebook group. Monica, I'm going to have you tell everyone what that is.
I look at the chat and I think all this value that Leslie has shared, and I think she practices this God's economy and rare faith. So this faith walk is a 21-day challenge, and it's using her 19 rules of prosperity. So we're talking about prosperity, getting out of debt, or whatever your idea is that you want to improve on or test the waters or whatever. And it's going to start on November 1st. It's valuable. It's 21 days can create a habit. We get to walk with like-minded people who are sharing their experiences and their challenges, and we just get to support and guide each other along the path. And we've also created a journal that helps us keep track of our experiences. So when you are done with this 21-day challenge, you're going to have a testimony of these principles with whatever you choose to test it on, whether it be small or big, as you put these to the test and act on them, and to be able to write about them and be able to just, I don't know. I'm just excited because there's so much, and you're going to have it all recorded. You're going to have a habit, and you're going to be just with a lot of like-minded people. It's going to be so awesome. Hope you come and join us.
Yeah. And so what it looks like is here's the link in the chat. You go register for the Faith Walk. It's free. And you're going to get a link on how to join the Facebook group where this is happening. And then each day you're going to see a new post on what we're doing that day. And it's going to be simple and short and something that anybody can do. And it's going to build your understanding of the principles and give you opportunities to put them to the test. So that link right there, go sign up for that and you'll get more information in the group. That's it. We're going to wrap up tonight. Monica, is there anything else you want to share about anything that has been said?
Just, I don't know, the word treasures is coming to mind. And you've got so many hidden treasures here, not just the book, but all these nuggets of wisdom and practice and putting these laws, they work.
Yeah.
If you act on them, they're going to work. It's God's law is there, and we put it to practice. And I just bumped my I got so excited. Knocked my camera. So yeah, whether it's money, relationships, just to come have fun with us.
I'm going to open it up. We're done for the evening, but I would like to open it up for any questions or anyone who would like to share how they have seen Rare Faith work in their life. Yeah, go ahead, Gail.
So I've shared the story in some of the groups, but a year ago, I listened to your Achieving the Impossible video, which I created a vision, and my goal was I had 10,000 in debt, and I created a vision of where I wanted to be, and I just started doing it morning and night, and now I'm down to 750 about a year later of that 10,000. And so I know the principles work. It really helped me, and it was a really powerful experience, and it's been a fun journey.
Beautiful, Gail. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Anybody else? If you want to say something or ask any questions. I'm reading in the chat. What is a good way to create an end goal if my other half doesn't want to dream or plan with me? How do I own my part better? Beautiful. Great question. So one of the things that is easy to fall into is the trap that if we're not on the same page, that there is no progress possible, that we have to agree for it to work. And number one, if you can work on the fear piece, you qualify for more unseen help than I think when we entertain fear. So you can work on that fear piece, work on keeping calm and watching what happens. The other thing is when you're working with somebody who has a different pace in mind or who doesn't want to even talk about it, if you can get together and find a common goal that you can both be excited about, sometimes you have to zoom out and say, hey, what do you think it's going to look like when our grandkids come to play 40 years from now? Like zoom out far enough to find something that you can have in common to build that vision. And then you do what you can do and keep the fear out of the equation. Someone asked about all these links. Yeah, these links are going to go out to everybody who is registered. So you'll have that in your email probably tomorrow. The recording will be available for a week. If you want to have it longer than a week, you can watch for it. It'll probably go out as a video of the week in my newsletter, but beyond that, it will be available to anybody who is in the weekly forum subscription. Weekly forum comes with your membership in any guided class. Like if you join a class with one of our facilitators or me, weekly forum is included in that. So when you come to your classes, say with me on Wednesdays, then Thursday nights, you can come together in the weekly forum. Monica is one of our forum leaders who shows up and helps answer questions and builds those relationships. So
Can I just share something real quick, Leslie?
yes, please.
You were talking about God's pattern and how it's a system and constant. And then you also mentioned about not rescuing and just accepting what it is. And one of the principles, one of the ways that I tested the principles was to go on that bike trek to Greece. And I had an experience there where it was by degree, it was one purple tree to the next, I had to make it up. And those hills are kind of hard to do some days. And I remember praying for a miracle, just praying and praying that that a truck would go by and I could throw my bike and hop in the back and they would take me up to the hill and then let me out and then I could keep going. But this miracle I just kept praying for and I just wanted that. And it was one of those answers where he's not going to rescue me. But when I finally settled down and got calm enough to hear the answer, it was, you are the miracle. And that just taught me that, we need to make the move. We need to pay off those debts. We need to keep working, keep walking up the hill or whatever it is. But that we have the capability to do that. And it's a constant effort. And yes, he's there to bless us with all that manna and everything, but we all have that capacity.
Yeah. And I remember, I'm kind of like a big, intense move kind of a person. Like if I get a vision for something, I want to do it right now and it's got to make a big splash and everything, but I burn out fast. I'm like sprinter energy, but then I'm for periods of time. My husband, on the other hand, he's like, oh, I see what needs to happen. And he's a long distance runner. Like literally, that's what he got his college scholarship in, was long distance running. And so he knows how to pace himself and he doesn't sprint. He just steady, like you got the rabbit in the hare. And I remember we had gotten ourselves into debt and we had these different balances and I was so stressed about it because I didn't want to be there. And I had some money over here and it was needed for other things, but I'm like, I can't take it. I need to use that chunk and just pay off this debt. Just pay it all at once, just outright. And we'll deal with this other stuff later. We'll find a way to cover other things later, but this debt's got to go. And so I did. I just threw it all at that balance and got rid of it. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's part of it. That's one of them. Good. And then for the next little while, I'm like stressed and scrambling, trying to make up for where that was supposed to go. And when I saw that verse that said, concern not yourselves about your debts, for I will give you power to pay them. And then he talks about how tarry in this place and you'll know by the Spirit where you should be. I'm guiding you. Even if you're not aware of it, I am guiding you. And he says, you need to form some acquaintances and you shall be led and it shall be given you and it shall come to pass in due time, the wealth will be yours. And so for him to say, concern yourselves not about your debts doesn't mean ignore your debts. It means deal with them. I will give you power to pay them, but line upon line, drop by drop. It's okay if you're paying them over time. Instead of what I was trying to do is like, it's got to go away right now. Just, okay, it's there. It's like Bob Proctor said, you pay off your debts on the way to a goal. Set up a system that maybe a percentage of what you do is going to go to that debt and it's handled. And the more automated it can be, the less you have to think about it. So that's that. Amber, thank you, Leslie. Love all the beautiful truths you taught. They apply to all areas of our lives. These principles work with finances, relationships, health, etc. Yes, I do want to be perfect right now. And that is not what is required. It is not requisite that man should run faster than he has strength. And that's something that I've had to really work on, is to be okay, to be at peace. Can you be at peace having debt? Those of you who are too at peace with having debt, need to wake up a little bit about it. Those of you who are super, super stressed about debt need to get okay with it. That's why it's not a one formula for everybody except what's universal. But depending on where you're at, you know deep down if you need to calm down, if you need to manage that anxiety about it, and just create a system where you're handling it unemotionally. Doors will open, opportunities will come to you as you seek them with this calm, steady trust in God, because He said, I will give you power to pay them. And if I had read that before throwing this chunk and putting myself in a desperate situation over here, then what would that have looked like? It would have been, okay, that debt is there. Here's what I need to pay on it to keep the creditor happy. And he's going to give me power to do that. And I'm going to order my life in such a way that I can start making progress at a steady pace. It's a season thing. And we have to get comfortable with long-term goals, even in the world of rare faith, if not especially in the world of rare faith. So I definitely need to calm my rear end down. So hope you guys will join me in the things we're doing. I'd love to see you in my class next Wednesday, Operating in God's Economy. There's so many ways to be a part of that course. Independent study, solo journey, where you get so many more things besides just that class. That's where you get Genius Bootcamp and Mindset Mastery and all the others, or in a guided class with a facilitator, or coaching with me and Carrie. That's going to be a powerful, powerful experience. But at the very least, join us on the Faith Walk and get the ebooks, read them all. I promise you, you're going to feel different. And when you feel different, you start seeing different results, because that's part of the process. That's all for now. Have a great week, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody.